Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the workshop series, which we have planned along with WRI on building the capacity of community partners to take up SUMA program in more meaningful way and in an informed manner. So this is third in the series. Basically, we will be talking about how we can take up tactical interventions. And our resource persons are from WRI. Rajiv will be leading the session. Over to you, Rajiv.
Yeah, thanks, Manju. Thanks for that. And hello, everyone. And yeah, firstly, thank you for taking out time, for this weekend. But we thought that would be more appropriate for everyone to sort of join instead of a weekday. Essentially what we're trying to talk about is, how to take forward your proposal. And before you make it permanent, can you use tactical urbanism as a measure to sort of test your solution on ground and sort of look at, necessary changes required, and eventually, before you sort of invest huge amount of money for making permanent. Well, before I start this particular presentation, there was one format of questionnaire shared with everyone. We do understand that there was lesser time for all of you to fill out, but we have just one or two groups who have filled this out. What we could do is very quickly run through these, proposals which have been filled out by the respective groups. After the session, in the next 2-3 days, till Tuesday or Wednesday, if you could just manage to fill this out and send. This is something which will really not only help your neighborhood to sort of refine your thoughts in terms of what you want to proceed with, while you're doing your proposal, but at the same time, it's very helpful for us also to understand, in which direction are your proposals going, and also we could use this eventually for the next following months as a reference to say that, this is what was set as a reference, and then how far have we reached, with respect to your proposal. So could I please invite someone from HSR Citizens Forum to just very quickly run through this proposal. I hope you can see my screen as well.
Shashi, do you want to do this or?
Yeah, either way, fine. You can take it up to Jayanti.
See, the questions that were asked were, what were the key features which makes your neighborhood unique? For HSR, we have a lot of unique features. I think so few that we have put together are like broad roads that we have, really broad roads. And HSR is known for its parks and green spaces. And we have very clean neighborhood, mainly because the residents are very aware of green initiatives. They know about segregation and all those things. So it's a very clean neighborhood. And it's a self-sustained community with a lot of good schools, colleges, and commercial establishments are there. And we have a very varied group of people demographically, and diversity is one big thing in HSR. It's a young population, working in IT industry, and other construction workers, and all those things. And so HSR is a startup hub. A lot of startup companies here, IT startups, and there's a lot of commercial real estate space available. It's a growing community, and it is also very close to Outer Ring Road, so which makes it very special and unique, because it's the layout which is developed very close to the Outer Ring Road, which is going to have metro and other public transportation. So there is a lot of scope for improvement and multimodal transport possibilities there. So the next one that was asked is, what are the key issues and opportunities related to mobility in public spaces in your neighborhood? As we took a walk through our neighborhood in one of the main streets, and we could see what are all the problems that are there. A lot of encroachments, uneven, or even in some cases no pavement. So walkability is very limited, and there's a poor lighting, hanging cables everywhere, and low tree branches. And absolutely there is no public transportation at all in HSR layout, which also came out from our surveys and stuff. People want public transportation, so there is a lot of scope for improvement there. And it is not a safe neighborhood for cycling, because the main roads are very congested with traffic, and with a very high traffic throughput, and there are a lot of blind spots. And interior roads, if you think we can cycle, but at night times it is not very well lit. And also there is a problem of overspeeding vehicles on the back roads and all that. So that is again a problem. Okay. So as far as the vision for our project, we want to start create a pilot which is very inclusive solution, and which we can scale up across HSR and hopefully beyond HSR. We'll get the main idea is to let people to do it in such a way that people will leave behind their personal vehicles at home, and instead adopt a sustainable mode of moving within the layout and outside the community also. Okay. So for any design, what are the underlying principles? It is inclusion. It has to be inclusive, sustainable, reliable, and scalable mobility solution for all the residents. Emphasize on all the residents of HSR. Residents should be able to reach most of the day, daily needs, shops and everything, just by walking or by the cycling. So what is happening now is people are taking cars to go to shops and stuff. So that has to not happen. And for needs outside the layout, obviously we need to be able to have a good access to public transportation in the form of feeder service and things, and last mile connectivity. And obviously it has to help on both sides, but from our HSR, there should be a good connectivity to our buses now, bus network now, and in future, if there is going to be metro, we should be able to access metro easily. And so what are the potential design elements and activities which contribute to creating a proposal on the ground? So a few design elements as we look at, it has to be accessible, and it has to be inclusive for all people, aged, young, disabled, women at night, all of those things. And it has to have good informational boards and prominent signages in appropriate places. It has to be pedestrian friendly walkways, and the intersections would be what we would want. And there should be speed controls with rumble strips, and if there is an intersection that we are looking at, it has to be there. And clear visibility of walkway, because what we see is a lot of trees at a lower level and a lot of cables, all of those things should not be there. Those obstacles, at least up to 8 feet, there should not be any obstacle. So that not only, even right now it is a challenge even for people, able people to go. Now consider senior people and people with challenges, they can definitely get into accidents because of these things and choking and stuff. And good cycle parking facility close to shopping areas and public transport, and sitting benches for seniors and those with challenges, safe road spaces for citizens, well lit with surveillance cameras, and green design spaces with hangout nooks, because there are hangout nooks will encourage more people to actually start walking, because they would just have it as a place where they can meet their friends, kind of hang out. So that will encourage. And then improved bus stands and customer friendly messaging and bus timings, well managed parking places, and footpath with no encroachment, because right now if you want to walk, there are a lot of encroachments on the road. Dedicated auto stands, and good integration all in all with multimodal transport, with people can take multi-modes of transport easily. Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. This is something that we put together just, in an hour or so.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, ma'am, I'm personally very happy with the way you have structured it. I think it gives a very clear picture. What I personally liked was, while your vision sort of covered a larger picture or larger goal which you want to achieve, you are also were able to manage to put some of the tangible elements which can go on ground. In a way, what I also just wanted to highlight was with respect to the last two presentations which were done. One was the principles one, and second the previous one which Madhura did on actually implementing or considering certain elements on site. I mean, I just clearly see those aspects are visible in this. I think it's a very good sort of first step which will help us guide to carry forward the proposals. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we also have someone from Malleshwaram, Swabhimana Initiative, to quickly run through your proposal? Do we have anyone from Malleshwaram?
Yes, I'm here, Navina Sridhar.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So you want me to talk about our proposals?
Yeah, very quickly, if you could very briefly explain.
Yeah, so we have asked for cycle lanes and hop on and hop off buses and the walkability. So we are along with the Malleshwaram Social, we are doing that, and Sensing Local. So we are looking for the cycle lanes and the hop on and hop off buses, which is more, as I have written that our proposal is for cycle lanes and hop on and hop off mini buses at every interval of 30 minutes within the locality. So that is what we're looking for, because Malleshwaram is having a population of 60% as senior citizens. So they're all retired, and what their occupation is, they go for a walks, and then they go visit temples, go visit the places where they can interact with each other, those kind of a thing. Because there is no proper footpath and no proper roads, because of the heavy traffic on the roads, it's the inability to move from the house. So as a result, during the household survey, everybody said that we are not moving out of the house. Like, no, it's not possible. The reason why they are not moving out, because there is no proper footpath and heavy traffic. If there is a hop on and hop off buses every half an hour, each house will not take the car out. So now what happens in one locality, if there are 100 houses, 100 cars will come out if they have to go for a 2 kilometers radius distance. So if there are hop on and hop off buses, they will not bring out their cars. If we have those buses, then automatically the traffic congestion will go down and air pollution will come down. And the people are comfortable because they're sure that every half an hour the bus will be there. They can get into the bus, go and do their whatever their work, and then they can get back within half an hour or 1 hour or whatever it is. That is, we are looking for, as it's a dire necessity for Malleshwaram residents. And also cycle lanes, because most of the youngsters would like to take their cycle out, because both the sides on the road, the cars are parked. So there is no place for them to move. So it leads to the parents are not letting the youngsters to use the cycles because the roads are not safe. So once we have designated cycle lanes, then probably people start using more of cycles, and these two-wheelers traffic will come down. And the people who are walking also, they'll feel safer, because most of the accidents happens due to two-wheelers. So, and then walkability lanes is like in the market area where the shopping malls and all that, all over there, most of the conservancies are used for this parking, and the vendors are occupying that. So if those conservancy lanes are converted into parking lanes, and the people can be more safer and comfortable doing their shopping in the main roads. And making that conservancy roads beautiful, because people, half of the time, these vendors use it as their toilets. So these are the three proposals we are looking for, and definitely it will ease out the traffic problem in Malleshwaram, and also people will feel safer and comfortable.
Sure, ma'am. Thanks a lot. Very well put together. And firstly, like I said earlier, it was too short a time to put together. I think It will be fine if you could take some more time later, to refine this document and send back again, because I do understand you had mentioned this question of, not understanding
Ah.
this fifth point, but
Yeah.
in a way you have actually explained everything which goes under section 5. Only thing what we were trying to do was, when we talk about these key principles, these are mainly a larger kind of key directions in terms of proposals what you want to take. For example, improved walkability, if you want to improve sustainability or safety and security in the area, these kind of things. Or everything which you have written here, which is more of a tangible element, something which you want to propose on ground, all of this will come under this section 5.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I hope that is clear. So if, for example, if you want to talk about, let's say cycle lanes
Yeah.
and walking, like footpaths, and then your key principles here would be improving walkability and, safety on streets, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. And vision in a way. So even these elements which you have written, public transport and good footpaths, everything is more of a proposal ground. So all of these can come under section 5.
Okay.
And project vision is something which you want to achieve in your neighborhood. For
Neigh-
example, here your vision could be to create a integrated network of, let's say, sustainable transport in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So this vision essentially helps you to sort of think of a larger picture of what you want to achieve for the, let's say, for next 5 years or 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And number 4 and 5, number 5 especially will be like a first step which you will take to sort of achieve that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here also, I believe I had written a few questions. I didn't get, why those questions were here. Is this something which you're talking about vendor, as in you mean someone who will implement the project?
Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, this
Yeah.
will fall under implementation part. We'll definitely take that up. I'll in fact let Manju or someone from DULT also to sort of ask. But otherwise, the key question here was, what is that your makes your neighborhood unique? In the sense, how different is Malleshwaram as compared to other
I
areas in
think
the city?
that answer, I think the second question answer is for the first question.
Yeah, that's what.
It
that's
got
what.
interchanged, I think, because
Correct.
in between my phone went hanging, and then I had to come back and then get it back, and the
Yeah, ma'am.
answer got interchanged.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It looks so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's absolutely fine then. Yeah. It's you can just
Yeah,
take
it's
some
very
more
well
time.
planned and managed well locality.
Exactly.
All the roads are well lit, and it's that's what I have written up. The first
Sure,
question
ma'am.
answer is gone to the second question.
Okay, ma'am. Sure. No, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Maybe you can just take a few more days, maybe discuss with your team, and then I think fill this out. Otherwise, I think everything you've spoken about is
Yeah.
pretty much clear with respect to the proposal. The only thing as a next step which might help you to do is this cycle lanes and hop on hop off which you have talked about. When you start talking of potential design elements and activities, you might also might want to consider the budget in mind. For example, this 50 lakhs which you're getting for your neighborhood, under this, because it is a very limited budget, let's say for this first year of achieving these two goals in your neighborhood, what are those few things which you want to implement to start with? It could be just the signages, or let's say you want to design certain bus stops, or hop off these
I think that hop on and hop off buses, that would be the first priority for us.
Yeah, ma'am.
Because
So
that will solve most of our problems.
Is ma'am coming? I thought ma'am asked us to come.
Can we please request others to mute?
See that the first project is hop on and hop off buses.
Yeah.
If that gets implemented, most of our problems will get solved.
Sure, ma'am. So the only thing you have to take care of is, given that 50 lakhs, which is a very minimal amount, what are those few things?
That is actually, yeah, we need to talk to the BESCOM people, not what is that BMTC.
Okay. Yeah,
BMTC
that-
department, DALT has to deal with the BMTC bus people and then
Hmm.
get those mini buses. We are not looking for big buses.
Okay, sure.
Mini buses. In fact, with the WRI, we had a proposal earlier that last mile connectivity from
Hmm.
the metro station to Malleshwaram 19th Cross. We remember that we had one discussion and we had a workshop, but somehow it didn't take.
Coincidentally,
Yeah.
I was the one who did that.
Yeah.
So I remember.
But I don't know what happened to that proposal. It didn't take off.
Yeah,
That last mile connectivity will go along with this hop on and hop off buses.
sure.
Like, so that will ease out most of our problems.
Yeah,
And even senior citizens, mainly for senior citizens, that will be the best facility we can offer it to
Yeah,
at
sure.
the moment, because people from 19th Cross, they come to 8th Cross.
Yeah, ma'am, sure.
So
No,
for
no, of course.
19th to 8th Cross, neither the auto nor the buses are there. So what
Sure.
they have to do? Each person will bring their car out.
That's true.
And parking will be the major issue over there.
Yeah.
So all these things will ease out if there is a hop on hop off buses like around the clock, if they are going around every half an hour. So people will time it and use it, and it will be more comfortable.
Sure. No, the completely agree. I think this is something during the course of your, creating the proposal in the next few months. I think this will definitely be discussed and we can figure out how to split, this proposal into different phases, and then what has to be implemented first and what goes after that.
Okay.
But definitely agree. But thanks a lot, ma'am. And this was very useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So with this, I will just shift to the presentation which we want to do, and the reason we wanted these two teams to also explain was hopefully if it is at least useful to some extent to the rest of the teams to also get a sense of how you have to sort of fill this particular questionnaire, primarily so that it gives you some sort of direction to start the whole tangible aspect of doing the actual proposal on ground. Yeah. And this tactical urbanism is something which will help you take the same quantifiable elements on ground, but with a much more quicker sort of an approach. Yeah. With this, I'll just quickly run through the flow, which we will first talk about the whole idea of street and public space projects and what is the assumption and what are the reality which happens on ground. What are the current planning processes which exist in cities, and then why there is a need for more inclusive approach. When I say inclusive, it's more in terms of how do you include people of the neighborhood also to make these proposals happen. And then we're looking at tactical urbanism itself in terms of what is the process, and what are the differences with respect to other processes and what are its impact, and a few pilots to just quickly explain to you in terms of how it is done. There are a few key determinants of success in terms of project ownership, administrative, project timelines, budget, stakeholder engagement, all of these aspects. I'll skip for this now. Yeah. So I think while as much as we look at permanent projects which happen in cities, where let's say if you take 3 or 5 streets which have to be developed in a neighborhood, that easily takes at least minimum 1 to 2 years to get permanently implemented. So there has always been this kind of a challenge, especially when you do city level projects. There is a lot of long-term disconnected process in terms of time and coordination between agencies. So it could be even within the same agency someone gets transferred, or it could be different agencies, let's say BWSSP versus BBMP versus maybe someone else altogether. So what sort of coordination that has to happen, and that to maintain that coordination for 2 years, 3 years of the project also becomes a sort of challenge. There's also lack of documentation of user needs. So as much as these projects are done on ground in cities, a lot of times the people in the neighborhood themselves are not aware that this is something which is happening, or maybe the proposal which has been done might need some amount of tweaking, which only the people of the neighborhood know that, something can work or something cannot. For example, let's say location of a bus stop in a certain area. So something which BMTC might assume and put it, which is more of infrastructural approach. The users or the neighborhood people might know that, this bus stop might not work here. If it is shifted like 50 or 100 meters away, which has more pedestrian footfall, this might work over here. It's more in that sense. And secondly, and thirdly, there is gap in communicating the project intent to a common man. So most of the infrastructure projects which happen in the city directly, they are just implemented on ground without people being aware that, it's actually going to come up or what is happening for that matter. Then that actually leads to creation of a lot of sterile spaces. So if I just think of 2.5 meter footpath just to put that everywhere, but maybe there are some other activities which have to be included as a part of footpath. Maybe if the same footpath is passing through a commercial area, does that require a special consideration, let's say for vendors or shops for that matter? So if those are not taken into account, it just becomes a very sterile proposal, which is sort of uniform throughout the city. And it also leads to underuse or death of these spaces. So if it is not designed in a contextual manner, a lot of times it completely remains unused, for that matter. This happens a lot for these open spaces for that matter. That's the reason why we need a more inclusive approach, where there needs to be a collaboration with government or implementing agencies or key decision makers with stakeholders on ground. And of course, there are a lot of opportunities if expert organizations can do the hand holding to sort of bridge the gap between the two, which is to some extent the model which we are also currently trying to do in terms of WRI, DULT, all of us trying to sort of create this whole interconnected system between the government, all of your neighborhoods, as well as this. Just give me a minute, sorry. Yeah. So with that, I was just jumping to a few examples. This is Meklong railway market, where the idea of, whenever this train passes, so all this market is spread out their goods on the track. But whenever the train passes within, let's say 5 minutes or 3 minutes, they actually do a makeshift. If you see people holding these, roof shades, they actually completely open it up for the train to pass through. And whenever train is gone, then they put back their, stalls. This sheer, need of, the spatial crunch, but at the same time, the coordination between, train systems as well as the market which exists. Just to give another quick example of Chinese New Year celebrations, or it could very similar to all the street celebrations we do, of how street end up transforming as important public spaces of the city in a temporal manner. And if some of you all of you are aware of this area called Manik Chowk, which is in Ahmedabad, this is a big square in the old city of Ahmedabad, where in the morning it is actually used for cattle, grazing, where all the cows are got here, and people actually come and, sort of feed them with fodder. In the midday, it actually becomes a parking lot, and in the night, it completely transforms into a makeshift, eatery sort of a market, where tables are put up in the center, and you have the eatery stalls opening up everywhere. And again, by the end of the night, they remove everything, and it is back to becoming an empty area for the cattle to come. So the idea of a single public space taking these kind of multiple roles. So these are examples which exist in our cities, which kind of prove that the cities are evolved over time through a need-based approach. It's not just to say that we just want to create something here. It's actually the kind of requirement of the area versus the spaces or the activities which have sort of evolved. And then the character of streets and public spaces signify our socio-cultural and economic status. Yeah. The next one is hence there is a need, the space can be created into a place by adopting learnings from the past and contextualizing that to the future. So there is a very critical need for us to understand what the area requires or what the people of the neighborhood require while we create certain proposals. And of course, and hence it needs to be an inclusive and people led process. So talking about tactical urbanism itself as an approach, it is tool for reviving streets and public spaces and turning them into a people friendly space using minimal cost and limited time. So if you see this example, this road, which doesn't have any safety measure in terms of cutting across, was converted more in terms of a roundabout with giving adequate space for cars to move, but also uniform space for pedestrians to move on either sides. But all this part you see is done just by painting it in a temporal manner to test whether it works or not. So most of you, I believe, are familiar with this process. We are just trying to help all of you to just structure that and tell you what are the components of tactical urbanism. I'll shift to the recipe part, where basically what is a recipe to sort of doing a planning and implementation of tactical urbanism. But before I start explaining what involves or what goes into tactical urbanism process, there are certain precursor statements. One, we cannot assume tactical urbanism is the only proposal which you will do and you are done with it and later we will see how to make our proposal permanent. It actually has to be the other way around, where you have to decide that after 7 months, what is my ultimate goal to achieve. Like the examples we saw, in both cases it is about improving cycling, for example. So if our goal is to create well-connected cycle tracks and improved junctions in the area, that becomes our goal, and your tactical urbanism becomes your first step to achieve that larger goal. So the key thing which has to be remembered here is you still have to derive your entire proposal in terms of what you want to make permanent in your neighborhood, and then include tactical urbanism to sort of test that permanent solution in your neighborhood. So hence tactical urbanism becomes your first step towards achieving your goal. The components and process listed in this presentation, it's more through our experiences of multiple TU projects we have done. So you try to package that into generic steps, but based on your area, your neighborhood, or the nature of project which you're doing, maybe these steps could go shift up and down, but at the same time your process also could modify slightly depending on your area requirement. And finally, collaboration is the key to success. And in a way, it'll be great if all of us could work together in a more collaborated manner. So these are 10 sort of steps which I'll run through. One is identifying your area of intervention where you want to do your proposals. Second is building a team. Third is creating a long-term vision for your project. Fourth is developing a proposal. Fifth is identifying funding. So when I say funding, this is basically for tactical urbanism part, which I believe you're getting through Suma, and that's something which we need to decide how that is disseminated. And then acquiring permissions. Then it's communications and outreach about your TU project itself, and organizing the tactical urbanism event in your area, and measuring and documenting impacts of this proposal and what has changed by doing that project. And finally, looking at developing a permanent implementation strategy post your tactical urbanism project. Step one, if you're looking at identifying the area of intervention, basically these are a few key points which can help you to identify, because let's say we're talking about improving cycling in your neighborhood, on what basis can you choose a certain street or a set of streets to do your intervention. So basically you have to identify a street or a public space or a pocket space, anything depending on the nature of your proposal, in terms of whether you want to improve a public space or you want to improve a street or you want to improve a junction, anything of that sort. An area with higher visibility and activity levels. So definitely choose something where you already have certain amount of pedestrian footfall preferably, and cycling and cyclists going through that. but also, to some extent, it should be quite, little active over the time. So it sort of creates a better opportunity to show the impact of your proposal. An area which demands change, something which you feel that by tweaking a certain aspect of this area or a street or anything, you think it's going to make some difference for the neighborhood or the users in that area. You don't have to end up choosing something which is an extreme corner in an isolated area where people never visit that space. But although there is a different take on that also, where we talk about concept of dead spaces on how to activate them. The next area with active neighborhood representation and government interest, and I believe all of you are already in that stage, so that need not be. So at the same time, as much as you see whatever exists in that area, you also look at the potential for change this area has got. When you choose a certain space, can you question that, can this project create a change in activities and behavior if I do a proposal in this particular part? Second is, can the space create an impact in its immediate surroundings as well as the neighborhood? So this sort of connects to the aspect of scalability, where you do something in one street. Can this be replicated? And can this create a certain trigger to say that, oh, this is a good project. Can this be done in the rest of the streets in the neighborhood or the whole neighborhood itself? The second part is sort of building a team. This again, I believe most of the SUMA teams are already in place. You have your respective teams ready, but this might also just help you in a general sense later post SUMA project also. If you think you want to do more tactical urbanism projects, it can include different set of representations in your neighborhood. So let's say if there is an institution, a school or a college, and if you think the role of kids, there are more kids, as users of the neighborhood or commuting in the neighborhood, then it becomes important to include representatives from institutions or even the students also as a part of your team. That becomes very crucial. So and just remember the best sort of a trick to do this is, if you broadly understand the land use, or even if you see in Google Map in your neighborhood, and if you see different landmarks, right from temples or school, mosque, church or mosque, any kind of religious locations. It could be schools and colleges. It could be some of the government or institutional buildings, and then it could be residential or commercial areas. So try to pick one representation from each type of each type of land use or each type of use buildings which exist in your area. That will definitely help you to get a good mix of representation. This very strongly applies to lower income groups as well. If you think there are enough slum areas or lower income groups, just make sure that you have at least one representation or a few representations from them, so that when you're building a proposal, that really helps to sort of to achieve a more holistic proposal. And then identify key project anchors. So here, for example, I have listed spatial design, then there is finance part and communication part. Maybe you have to create some social media outreach which you have to do, and activities, things which have to be designed as a part of your tactical urbanism event itself. And then look into creating smaller teams for each of these categories. So as much as all of you are enthusiastic in working in most of the components, it's best to sort of split that into smaller teams, so that there is that individual responsibility shared for each of the components. Then step 3 is create a long-term vision. This is something which I explained earlier, but this is quickly with an example. If you see the picture towards the rightmost corner, this is a roundabout which is done out of the whole stone and landscape and everything. But the way it started was, they basically painted one of the roundabouts with few paints, and the signages made of cardboard and few stands, all of that. And then that led to semi-permanent materials. So this painting, let's say if you want to consider doing it or 1 day, so 1 day or 2 days or a few days, this semi-permanent materials could be kept for about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, something like that. So it's slightly longer than the temporary materials, and this you can achieve, let's say with flower pots, traffic cones, or these kind of barrier, which is in a temporary fashion. That eventually leads to something which is more permanent in nature. So the key vision I'm talking about is their goal was to create a permanent roundabout, to make sure that there is no conflict of vehicles at this intersection. But to achieve that, they created this first part to just test whether it actually works or not, or what kind of changes does it require. And then they validated that with semi-permanent materials of this sort, and finally it was made permanent. So during this process, they also worked with certain budgets, how much does it cost to make a permanent thing. And similarly, I will till then I'll do this kind of a temporary. So most of these materials are very minimal cost, or you could even like literally borrow it from the local agency or within your own houses. For example, flower pots are very easy means of getting, keeping it on the street from the neighborhood itself. So is there a way you can just look at using the day-to-day materials to create these kind of proposals? And then developing a proposal, and this connects back to the principles which we were talking about, where you can create a design program in terms of what you want to do. For example, I want to create improve safety and security in my area, and I connect that back to whatever, improving junctions or creating well lit footpaths, all of those. Or you want to create a develop a vibrant community space or accessible to all age groups. It could be either one or multiple of these categories which you can choose, and of course this is not limited to only these 5. It could be even beyond this. Basically you have to set a design program in terms of what you want to achieve. Then,
What do you want, ma?
hello, sorry.
Can I request everyone to mute yourself? We will have a question answer session towards the end of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Manju. This is the spatial part I was talking about. In the questionnaire, when we said which are your design principles, and then which are the spatial elements which define your proposal. These are the spatial elements which we are talking about. For example, here the spatial elements could be this demarcation of your road with respect to the cycle track. So you might need to mark at the same time, have bollards over here. If there is a residual public space, can I create a temporary seating and shaded area and activate this with certain set of activities? So one is the infrastructural part, which goes in terms of painting and marking and demarcating certain areas. But there is also an activity part where, when I create this area within a residual space, the next question is what kind of activities which I can put in, which will be suitable for the area. Is that, can I create for example, a community library just to demonstrate for a day, where children can come and read books here? Or can I create a performance booth, like I create a small stage, call a few musicians to come and play over here and understand how it is used, more in that sense. Or if you see this side, it's actually done as a temporary parking space for cycles along with seating. So some of you were expressing that you might need bicycle parking in your neighborhoods. So then can you sort of scoop out a space in the given street to sort of create that kind of a temporary measure for bicycle parking, for that matter? So it basically quantifying your design proposal through certain spatial elements as well as activities in a given proposal. The next one would be develop the proposal itself. And it is very important that at every stage, although there might be a core SUMA team in your neighborhood which might be working on the proposal, it is very important for you to go back and talk to the rest of the stakeholders in the neighborhood. It could be school children, or like I was saying, low income groups, or anyone else, even senior citizens for that matter. So all kinds of users who will be using the space, and have a constant discussion with different users of the space to get their feedback of whatever works, and if there are any changes required in this proposal, or anything else has to be added based on their perspective. Once that is done, you get to step 5, where you identify and acquire funds. So like I was saying, the funding part, I think it's sort of comes as a part of SUMA, but at the same time, you also need to create an estimate. As much as the funding exists, first you need to understand how much does my tactical urbanism project roughly cost. So this can be categorized into 3 sort of broad sections. One is the materials, in terms of, let's say, you're getting temporary furniture, or carton boxes or anything of that sort, a landscape which you're creating, or if you're creating any kind of shading, let's say you're getting umbrellas or any big shading structures as a part of this thing, or paint, floor paint, which is often used, or even these tapes which demarcate the space in the traffic situation. The next one is the logistics part, which falls as a part of transport, temporary space for storage, as well as preparations of food and other facilities. So generally, these volunteers who are involved in creating this space and building this space, during the course of those 2 or 3 days, they require all these other facilities. This is something which is very important, has to be taken care of. And the other costs in terms of communications and outreach and other team expenses. The next one, also as a part of identify acquire funds, is this also is an interesting take you can take, where let's say there is a certain limit funding which is limited as a part of SUMA. But you want to do in a much larger scale in terms of the proposal, to test that proposal. So you might look at these alternative approaches to gain that kind of additional funding. And this, in a realistic scenario, this is what happens, that if you don't have any funding available, these different sources can really help you to acquire those kind of funds. The number 6 is permissions. Where if you're looking at permission from government authority or other relevant agencies, this very strongly applies to traffic police also, because if you're, let's say, improving a junction or a street, and if you want to paint that particular junction, so you might have to take necessary permissions from traffic police to say that we might be either blocking this road or only retaining only 1 lane of the road till we finish this proposal. And usually, since this doesn't exceed more than 1 or 2 days, you can take those permissions to say that from so and so time we want to cordon off this road, because we will be doing certain activities in this area. You might also require certain other permissions from the relevant departments, depending on the kind of proposal you're doing. Step 7 is communications and outreach. I definitely feel this is a very big or a very important step as a part of tactical urbanism, because if you're doing it for the people of community, how best we are making sure that all the people of the neighborhood actually come and attend that event, or whenever that you create that proposal for 1 or 2 days. Make sure that people come and use it in the best way possible to understand the maximum potential of your proposal. So right from, let's say, if you start planning 15 days or 20 days earlier for this proposal, this outreach has to happen from the beginning stage itself, to tell people, firstly, to even volunteer, to come and, let's say, to do painting or creating certain temporal things in your neighborhood. It is very important to gather that kind of capacity of people who are going to help you to sort of achieve that thing. So one is, in fact, participating in creating this space and building the space on the day of the event, but also you bringing in users who can use this and also give their feedback to say that maybe this space created, this parking created or this public space created might require something else, or you can shift it to this particular corner. Or it could be even in terms of creating certain crossings in a street. Where are those crossings required? Are they creating a certain impact? Or if you've created a temporary parking spot, is that parking spot enough, or it has to be shifted to some other place? These kind of feedbacks which you can get from the users. And then you can use these different kinds of mediums, right, from creating posters. It could be the social media platform you have, or now that you have WhatsApp groups, which is very active, or even, in fact, having a few in-person meetings with at least the key people in the neighborhood. And step 8 is, of course, organizing the tactical urbanism event. In this, the first one is the building the space, where usually it is done in the night to avoid conflicts with movement of vehicles and people. Volunteers and locals usually build the space based on the proposals. Demarcate the areas using, paints and other materials. You can use these materials to sort of create this space. You can set up furniture using temporary materials. You can infuse planned activities. For example, you want to create small game areas or other any other activity areas. You can start, planning those and including that as a part of your design space. And of course, allow a few spaces to grow organically. So instead of designing everything, saying that this is a hard and fast thing that people have to do this, maybe out of the kind of users you get or people's behavior, maybe they might use the space very differently. So allow a small part of your proposal and keep that flexible, so that if people might want to use it for a different way. Some part of a proposal also creates an opportunity for that. So more in that sense. So this is a quick example. For example, this picture, this was done in Kochi in one of the open spaces. The cycles which you see were actually lying in front of police station, which were a part of all the crime cases or theft. These kind of issues happened. So for the last few years they never used this cycle. What we essentially did was took the same old cycles, cleaned them up and painted them to create certain murals in our area. So similarly, you can identify a lot of already existing objects in your neighborhood instead of buying something which is completely fresh. The next one is part 2 of organizing your event is to celebrate the space, right? So this is the day when you open up to people to sort of use it. And during this time, that smaller teams which you have created in terms of volunteers assign definite tasks for each one of these volunteers. So as much as the space which will be used for these kind of activities and events, it is also important to do other kind of other tasks like managing traffic. For example, if you cordoned off one road or you kept only one lane open, you might need enough volunteers to actually divert the traffic to say that this particular area has been redone. You cannot use this, please take the alternate road or take this particular road, for instance. And you'll also need enough volunteers to do other kind of logistics. For example, you've arranged, let's say, food counter, for example, on that particular day. So someone to run around, make sure that any kind of these props or counters, everything is managed well. If you've invited someone, let's say if you got invited someone for cycle rentals on that particular day, are you coordinating with the rental person to make sure that there are enough cycles which are kept always, so that the people who come to visit that particular part have cycles to use all the time. It shouldn't happen that all of a sudden your cycling booth is completely empty for half an hour or 1 hour of the precious time you have. So just sort of think of it in an overall thing, both spatial as well as activity wise, both direct and indirect activities which happen on ground. And finally, of course, be prepared for surprises. Anything can happen, including the fact that the rains are happening right now. If you're doing it in the few months, any kind of traffic, or let's say you have cordoned off the road to make sure that nobody enters, but maybe the shop owners who own two-wheelers might want to still come inside and park vehicles in a certain area. So make sure that as much as you are defined certain activities, these kind of surprises might occur. So how well both your team as well as your proposal is prepared to take these kind of changes which happen. The last part of the tactical urbanism itself is a very, very important point again. Because it is temporal in nature, you are bringing in temporary elements, temporary activities. Please make sure that you're responsible enough to clean up that space to make sure that it is back to normal after the proposal is done. For example, you basically arrange for a food counter or anything, and you have all the disposable materials to be used there. It shouldn't happen that all the people who come there have used glasses and thrown it all around the road, and we assume that our proposal is done. We go back realizing that there's enough amount of waste just lying around everywhere. So just make sure that this is a very important part where you reserve, let's say, a few hours of after the event or even the next day to make sure that, okay, we are going to come back and make sure that we clean this up and bring the space, back to its original state. Step 9, this is something which happens during the entire process, which is document and measure the impacts which will happen. Let's say you're doing a proposal on increasing pedestrian footfall in your area. It would be worthwhile to very quickly document how many people are already walking in this area. Is it less? Is it more? And what is the amount of space do they have to walk? Let's say an approximate footpath width which is available for them to walk. Once you've done your tactical urbanism, let's say one of your proposal to increase your footpath width from, let's say, 1.5 meter which exists to 3 meters or 3.5 meters to make sure that there's enough space to walk. So the way you measure is, before the proposal, you have a certain width available and you have a certain pedestrian count to say that in an entire day, so many number of pedestrians use this space. But at the same time, after doing a proposal, you feel that is the number of pedestrians have increased, in this particular demarcated area, which kind of justifies your proposal that, because there are more number of people walking after doing your tactical urbanism, we want to make this footpath permanent and have a wider footpath in my area. Similarly, the same things can apply for safety or livability index. Let's say you can do a questionnaire format, to ask a few people before creating a safe or lively space. Let's say you're dividing a public space. You can even create a questionnaire format to say that, how, safe do I feel in terms of rating from 1 to 5, or, how often do I use this space, or which time of the day do I use it, do in any sort of format. And the same set of questions could, be altered or repeat after your tactical urbanism to say, has the safety level increased, in this space during my proposal stage. So can you still interview a few people to sort of compare what has happened earlier and what has not? So there are different ways to create these benchmark parameters for your neighborhood so that you can compare that after the proposal is done. So this really helps you to justify for a more permanent solution which has to happen. So finally, when your tactical urbanism event is done, where you have done this and taken it forward and achieved your certain proposal, then the next stage could lead to revising your designs based on the feedback you've got, based on whatever you observed, how well people are using, does it require some kind of tweaking or changes? Secondly, prepare detailed drawings and BOQs. Once you revised your design, you're creating detailed drawings and BOQs for your given proposal, because you roughly have an idea how the design works, and I'll draw it up and I'll start creating detailed drawings for that. Finalize funding in terms of how much funding does it need in terms of materials or even the contractor, all of those people. Project tendering as well as implementation, which eventually happens. So that these are sort of some stages which occur after your tactical urbanism is done. So essentially this is just a final slide. Pick a street or an open space, identify core issue and opportunity in that given space, build a team, design the space and collect funds which is required, and finally build, celebrate, and clean up the space. This is just a gist of the entire 10 steps which we had done. Yeah. With that, I'll stop here. If anyone has any questions, I'm free to answer. Thank you.
Rajiv, you were saying about event. Are you looking at this tactical intervention as a few days of activity? I thought at least it will be a long-term thing. So I don't really understand when you said clean up after the event or do there for 2 3 days.
Yeah. So in a way, ma'am, this whole idea of tactical urbanism, basically it means it's a temporal, system of testing your proposal. So it's not a permanent solution, because the intent or the key reason why tactical urbanism is done is so that it firstly doesn't take too much money. Secondly, the designs which you do in your proposal, most of the time, if they always remain on paper and you have to explain that to someone in the community, who might not know how to read a design plan or, things like that. This becomes your live test bed or live sort of site to actually go and translate this whole design onto ground for people to actually see. When I say a 3-meter footpath, how big it is, because for someone to show that on paper might be very make someone experience on paper might be very different. But while if you actually draw that line of 3 meters on the road, it sort of shows someone to make him understand that, okay, this is how big footpath will be if it's like a 3-meter thing. So the reason we are saying event or addressing this as a temporal thing is you are going to put majority of your funds in permanent infrastructure, which is going to come up. But this will just help you to test all the proposal you have done in a few days. It could be 1 day or 2 days. Or there are certain ways where, for example, if I'm looking at traffic conflicts in a big junction, for example, it could be retained for even 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on the kind of study you want to do or the kind of data you want to collect. So it will depend from case to case. But as a thumb rule, I would say the range of doing this tactical urbanism can vary all the way from 1 day to probably 1 week to 2 weeks, roughly. So then it just helps you to study your proposal on ground. Then you're validating your proposal that, okay, my proposal working the best way possible. And then I will just take this forward and make it permanent. So that's the broad intent we are talking about. I hope I've answered.
This is true for an infrastructure project, right?
Yeah.
But assuming that our proposal is to have a feeder service and work around it,
yeah,
we can't possibly run a test feeder service, right? Or you think that is also in the cards?
Exactly, ma'am. So this, we also had an internal discussion. It's also this is a point which we also wanted to mention. The reason we are doing this tactical urbanism is not because everybody has to take it up and do it in their neighborhood. It will depend from every proposal to proposal. And of course, you're completely right. This is primarily applicable for a spatial intervention, which we are talking about. But if it's a case like you, where you're talking about feeder systems, maybe you might need a different method to test your solution. For example, if your final solution is to have, let's say, 10 or 20 feeder buses in your area, your pilot could be to actually coordinate with BMTC to have those pilot buses running in a specified route, for, let's say, 1 day or 2 days or a week, to make sure that you test that route is working or not, or what has to be tweaked. Although there might be a few spatial things which you can do, although you're talking about feeder system, maybe you might require signage, for example, right? To say that maybe some road which is a 2-way, you want to convert that to 1-way to create a better movement of buses. So you might need necessary signage and indication to say that, this is temporarily a 1-way road, and hence we have these direction signages which we have put in. It's more in that sense. Or you might require some junctions or crossings which have to be painted with crossing to make sure that pedestrians are aware, that these buses or vehicles are coming. So I'm equally taking care of pedestrians as much as my feeder buses. So completely agree with you. It will depend from proposal to proposal, but tactical urbanism is very majorly applicable to a spatial intervention.
Thank you.
Rajiv, I have a query.
Yeah.
Considering that all of us are new to this concept, how do we know that, okay, we are ready for moving from temporary to permanent? Is there any parameters as a team, we should be looking at? Anything like tips like?
Manju, but actually I think it's completely the other way around. I don't think the teams, the neighborhoods have to do tactical urbanism and then worry that, how to make this proposal into a permanent thing. what they have to do is, that's where I think the guiding document which we have shared to sort of list down their proposals can be a starting point for them to first list down. Okay, these are 5 things which I want to do as a permanent proposal in my neighborhood in the next 7 months or 8 months I have as a part of SUMA. So if my goal is, let's say, to create a improved junction with all the necessary crossings and signage to make sure that it is safe for pedestrians and cyclists to either use or cross that particular junction. So that becomes my permanent proposal for which I'll keep my major chunk of money. And then I work backwards to say that, okay, I have taken this junction. My goal is to make it permanently safe. My tactical urbanism would be to test this junction for, let's say 3 days or 1 week by using paints and, signages to put there and make sure that the vehicles and the pedestrian and the motor vehicle users will use this junction in the way I have designed. So in a way, your tactical urbanism becomes a test bed for your permanent solution, and it's not a case where you are going to design that junction and later wonder, should I even consider this junction or not? So most of the time, what I'm trying to say is it's best to do this tactical urbanism where you're going to do your permanent solution. It cannot happen that it's not a requirement of SUMA that you have to just do it like a checklist where I do a public space and somewhere and test it just as an activity, but later I take some other public space or street to do my permanent proposal. So please, you have to just first pen down your permanent proposal and work backwards to say that, this will be my sort of initial step to achieve that.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions?
So in many cases, it may not be possible to do anything without actually do this tactical intervention without actually doing the intervention, right? For example, if you look at a walkability and improving walkability, the footpath is in a very bad condition. Okay, and you are not going to suddenly change anything overnight that people will start using it, right? Maybe because it will require a lot of work which we actually want to do as a part, we'll be doing it as a part of the project itself, right? So how do you create a test case in those cases? I'm sorry if I'm kind of
No, ma'am, that's a very valid question. So you are basically saying that let's say the paver blocks which are put on the footpath, if they are uneven and there are a lot of potholes and uneven surface on the footpath, then it has to be officially addressed through a permanent proposal, right? It can't be done through a temporary fashion. That's what your question is, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. See, there is always a limitation for any kind of tool you use. So the reason we're using this is because it is low cost and you can do it in the best way possible. So what could be done in those kind of situations is one, relook at that footpath and other aspects of footpath as well. For example, let's say there are certain areas which are completely have this kind of situation where there are potholes even within footpath. And it's a lot of uneven surface and things like those. So then you can use temporary materials. For example, if the depth of the pothole is too much, can I use, let's say, sand or even, sandbags to sort of fill that up and clear that up and level it up with other parts of this? Or can I use jelly stones or existing some kind of a sand or any kind of filling, which will sort of fill that up and then have a layer on top, which is more sturdy, of course, like wooden planks, or you get a lot of wood in your, waste collection center. So can I use any kind of materials like that to level up certain sections of my footpath? This is one. The other big aspect of footpath is universal accessibility, which we call it as, where if, let's say, I'm coming on a wheelchair and if the footpath is 1 feet high, then I definitely climb that up if there is no ramp available. So can I create wooden, ramps with waste wood to demonstrate, how a person on a cycle or a wheelchair also can still, or let's say a senior citizen can sort of use these very high footpaths to sort of achieve, that particular thing. And third is, the kind of safety elements in terms of street lighting as well as, street furniture also for that matter. So do these elements exist in my footpath? Is it completely dark in the night when I walk? Does it require lighting? So your tactical intervention would be to actually introduce a few lights in the footpath to say that, if this is actually lit and clean and nice to walk, people are going to use it even in the night. So these lights, for example, you can get it on rent, from any of the vendors for that matter. So it's when you say footpath, maybe it requires more money to do a permanent infrastructure of the surface, but there are enough ways to at least showcase that footpath in its complete sense in a temporary and a low cost fashion also. And the moment you justify that to people saying that, because we have done these 3 or 4 changes, which are very minor, but it's creating some kind of an impact that in the night people are, especially women, have started to use this, over the course of this week, then it rather justifies your reason why you're choosing that street or footpath to be improved, permanently. It's more in that sense.
Rajiv, this is Shashidhar. I have a question.
Yeah.
So I think from the same point you mentioned, even current study that we can see how people are using today and what challenges they are facing today, and see a small interventions if that makes them change. Like, for example, somebody walking in a footpath, they deviate and come back onto the road and continue for 300 meters, get back onto the footpath, right? That's an example. If there is a small intervention that makes them continue on the footpath tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
That is an intervention that you're like tactical intervention that helps to analyze, right?
Exactly.
And secondly, I also think that if we are improving an intersection, let's say there is no dividers in the intersection, temporarily using cones, a divider,
Exactly.
right? Or even a tires, right? Cut the tires into half and then keep like 3 or 4 tires, painted tires, and then see if that changes the pattern of vehicles turning left and right.
Yes.
You know, and if that intervention showcases that people start following the rules and less accidents can happen, and take videos and photos and analyze number of cars passing through, that may help analyze, this intervention will help. We can make that permanent with actual material or, bricks and stuff like that. Does it summarize what you're thinking?
Definitely, yes. Very, very well put across, Mr. Shashi. It's completely exactly the same thing we are talking about, where you have a plan ready for your proposal. Just think of the best way to reflect that same plan on ground in a temporary way. Like he was mentioning about cones and tires and paints. It could be as simple as that, but it should just serve the purpose of channelizing let's say cars to go in a certain way. Let's say sometimes the road width is very uneven in certain roads, so can you create a uniform width to make sure that that unevenness doesn't happen, which often leads to bottlenecks or crowding of vehicles. So more in that sense. Just one small point to add here. Although the funding is limited, I know that these test beds are sort of limited, especially this happens in case of let's say cycle tracks for that matter. Let's say because of limited funding or whatever reason, you're creating only one street stretch of this test bed of using the cycle track, for instance. It's always good if you can work out a way where you create a loop instead of having a dead end for a temporary cycle lane also, which you're creating, because for a cyclist to use that thing, even when he has to enter, it is still okay. But when all of a sudden, if the cycle track is ending into a major junction or a crowded area, definitely that defeats the purpose of a cyclist to feel safe when they're doing it. So it's best if you if you can either create that continued loop using a paint, or you can use direction signages to say that okay, you can continue from here to go into these sections, or use traffic cones maybe as a easy measure to say that okay, we are demarcating this, but we're spacing out the cones in a way that it completes this loop. Some of these things would just really help you to sort of think of that proposal in a much more integrated manner rather than in a very isolation manner. So any proposal you do, just think a step beyond to say that, although I'm doing one part of it, is there a way I can extend that to sort of show it as a complete, proposal? Any other questions?
Hello, may I speak?
Yes, Mish.
When there is constraint of the roads, width and all,
Hmm.
how we can plan the footpaths or cycling? It's already there and buildings have all come by this side of the roads. It cannot be expanded further,
Yes.
even though we want it. So in that case, how we can have a practical solution for this?
Yes. No, that's a very, very good question.
Main
And-
roads.
Yeah. No, very good question. And it to some extent connects to the point I was just mentioning. See, what we usually do, right? When we look at a street and we say that, it is very congested, we're using it. It's very hard to say just by looking at that one street and say whether it's good or bad. What is ideally required to be done is you have to zoom out a little bit, and because all of you know your neighborhood best, zoom out a little bit and say where are the vehicles coming from into this road and where are they going, and is there how is this whole network of vehicles or movement of people, vehicles in my neighborhood, rather than looking at only one street. That is number one. So the moment you start doing an entire analysis of where and which direction our vehicles are moving and where are they coming from, where are they going, as a next step, what you do is, if this street is an important street for me where people have to use it for walking and cycling, is there any parallel street where I can shift some quantity of some amount of vehicles to the adjacent street to reduce the pressure on this particular street? So that is step number 2. So if you are able to achieve that, out of 100 vehicles which pass through that in 1 hour, can I reduce, sorry, not 15 minutes, let's say, can I reduce that down to 50 vehicles, for instance? Then can I reduce that load on that street to the next adjacent street or the closest street? That will then give you an opportunity to at least say that, okay, now that I've reduced the number of vehicles coming in, so can I test, you takes by scooping out, let's say only 2 meters, or let's say 2.5 meters for walking, and I'll leave the remaining 3 or 4 meters as one lane for vehicles. So that becomes your step 3. And finally, even after doing all of that, if you feel that there is no adequate space to give like a dedicated cycle lane or walking lane, we can at least think of creating a mixed lane, which can be both for cyclists as well as pedestrians. And there are enough ways to control the speed of cyclists also, so that they don't cycle fast through that. So in a larger sense, what I'm trying to say is, although we are thinking of interventions in individual streets or individual spaces, it is important to look at the overall network in the neighborhood and what defines the movement of or quantity of vehicles in that particular road. And this of course requires a little bit of study of the neighborhood, vehicle circulation, and all of those aspects. Only then you can take a call on what best could be done in that street. And of course, the last point is, all said and done, I still completely agree with you, because there are certain scenarios where in certain neighborhoods, there is a situation where the road width of course becomes way too narrow, and during those times maybe we have to just work with some non-spatial parameters. I mean, of course I don't recommend that's the best way to do it, but maybe through certain signages, or maybe certain through awareness about cycling and walking, we could try to sort of achieve that. Maybe just create that street as a low speed zone, maybe where you can cut down the speed of cars which are moving there, which can just help bring in some amount of safety for pedestrians and cyclists. But although that's the worst case scenario which I'm saying. Okay, So it's 5:50. Any other questions? Okay.
Rajiv, is there any situation where you realize that you did the tactical intervention and then it is not going to work?
Hmm.
And if that is the case, how do you redefine your proposal? Can you explain if
Okay.
there is any example from your previous?
Yeah. No, that has never happened to us. But there might be a situation of that sorts where we might feel that this is an important area, we'll test it in a certain way, it doesn't work. I think either we relook at the kind of proposal we have done there or the nature of intervention which is done, or think of an alternate option for intervention. But before I say any of this, because this is of course the worst case scenario, because I feel based on our experiences of doing this thing, if you've done your homework well to say that the reason I'm choosing this particular area for my tactical intervention is ABC, because I've understood that this has an issue, and if I change certain things in this proposal, this will create an impact, and because I know that the final proposal is so and so, and that's the reason I'm doing it. It is there are very less chances that your whole consideration of that space itself might go wrong. It might be a case where maybe let's say you're given like 4-meter wide footpath, but we realize that that's too much of a space, it's leaving very less space for cars, and I'll bring it down to 3 meters. So that tweaking of the proposal might happen post your testing, but I think there are very few cases where you might have completely shift this area of proposal to somewhere else, which clearly means that your backing of your study of that neighborhood of that area and your vision in terms of what you want to change is not strong enough.
Thank you.
Okay, so in that case, if there are no more questions, just a few closing remarks, and also just as next steps, which hopefully will be useful for all of you. One, of course, the document which we have sent, please take a look at that and fill in that document, and please send it to us so that we can give the necessary inputs which are required, especially the last section where we are talking about the design elements. That will immediately help you to start defining, quantifying whatever you will require on ground. In turn, how you want to take that forward to your tactical urbanism work. And as next steps, for doing this tactical urbanism itself, I think your starting point will be, of course, to create a design proposal as a plan. And in terms of which space you want to choose, and what are the design things which you want to include, what are the activities you want to include in that particular area, and accordingly start looking at how do you translate that in a more temporary fashion. So going forward, I believe we will have the nodal officers from SUMA as well as other folks who will sort of support each one of the neighborhoods to sort of take your proposal forward. So once you've sort of filled up that sheet, I think that will just help us also to understand which direction you're thinking in. But at the same time, I think as next steps, all of your neighborhoods will have to start getting into creating the design proposal itself. Yeah. With that, yeah, thank you everyone for your patience, and Manju, yeah, off to you.
Tanmay, would you like to close the session?
Yeah. Good evening all. Sanmay this side. Thanks for your participation, which I saw the discussion to be quite intense. And also it's a heartening situation that most of the communities have started working on the proposals, maybe it in a beginning stage, but I would expect it to be definitely gaining momentum in future days. Thanks, Rajiv, for all these inputs that would certainly be helpful. And the reason for doing this particular workshop is while you, your team, all the communities and their team members are working together with our nodal officers and coordinating team. Among other proposals, which proposals have a correlation with and linkage with a tactical interventions, please think through in that context. You discuss among yourself and with the nodal officers also, and while coming out with your draft proposals, please earmark that. And I think Rajiv has already touched upon the finer points of those things. So that's it, and that I look forward to further further discussion and consultation with you. And Manju, if you have any other point, you can add. Otherwise, we can close. Thank you all.
No, nothing much. So we'll close this session. As we have done in earlier sessions, we'll be sharing the PowerPoint and the recording in case you want to revisit the session and share it with your core team members. Secondly, as we have progress with our household analysis report and focus group discussion report, I request all of you to go through the report and confirm so that we can finalize it and publish it in various platforms and our website. Thirdly, we are planning to have interns which will be tied up with each community. We will be reaching out to you with further information on that. So that will be additional help given from DALT and WRI in terms of your proposal development. That's all from my end. Happy weekend to everyone. Thank you
Manju,
all.
one last point, just a minute. Since you raised the interns point, may I request all the partners also to come out with their list of and the key people who are day-to-day working on these proposal making, and while we are working on this proposal stage. If you have any experts like architects and other designers with skills which are relevant to this, please let us know also. Please, while discussing with the nodal officers and with Manju, please let us know. That will help us in taking this forward in a more planned way. So just wanted to add this point. Thank you. Happy weekend to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a well conducted presentation. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Manju.
Thank you.
Thank you.